this week's RCB Radio Sport Show, live on 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie. My name is Jim Conlan, and I'm joined this evening by regular sports analyst for County Clare, Seamus. And I'm also delighted this evening to be joined by the 2021 Clare minor football manager, Dermot Coughlan, and also the 2021 Clare under-20s football manager, Michael Neylon, to reflect on their campaigns last year and also to look ahead for this year in terms of the uncertainty and hear about their proper preparation for the year ahead, and also to talk about the sort of evolution of player pathways from county development squads onto Clare senior sort of setups. And first of all, I suppose if I can start with you, Dermot, I suppose you're entering your third year as a minor football manager. Has it been sort of a real sort of a learning curve in terms of the difference from club management in terms of operating in terms of with teams all across Clare, taking on a minor county manager sort of approach? Is it a different sort of mindset and a different sort of approach each year? And do you rely on what you've learned in terms of adult football management, or do you have to take a real different sort of twist to it?
I suppose every year is different. Like, and the quality of player you're getting at county level is absolutely fantastic. And we would have worked a lot of development squads down through the years. So each year brings a different team, brings a different squad, brings a different style of football. So it's a different challenge every year to get the most out of those players. But I have to say, the players coming through to us have been in great shape. They've been in great quality. There's great credit due to the clubs, and it's been a great challenge for us, Jim.
And I suppose Dermot, last year was like no year we've seen sort of before. You were on, you were off, you were on, you were off, and the great sort of worry was you wouldn't be on at all. And then when it came sort of thick and fast. So in terms of preparing for minor in 2020 compared to minor in 2019, where you had so much preparation time and lead-in time, was it a sort of a headache in one way, but a delight in another way that you got onto the field given everything that was going on?
Yeah, Jim, it was great relief for a finish, because it was looking at one stage that we weren't going to have any football in 2020. We had a lot of work done up to the 5th of March when it was we had 5 challenges played after Christmas, and I felt we were really going well at that stage. We were really looking forward to the 10th of April. We were starting to peak, going nicely, and then obviously the 2 lockdowns came, but it was looking like at that stage we weren't going to have any football. But as I said, fair play to the Munster Council, they did find a window. It was the 1st of December we started back on after the second lockdown, and actually we had 20 days to actually play the 3 games. So you were trying to get a lot of football in a short space of time, but we were delighted with the quality of football we played. The work we had done earlier on showed I suppose that we were in a great position to play the football we wanted to play. We just felt that bit of sharpness, and maybe the 3 games in 10 days maybe ultimately caught us out for a finish, Jim.
Yeah, and I suppose, Dermot, in terms of, you mentioned that the hectic sort of schedule, and I suppose you had sort of dual players as well. And I suppose in 2019, there was a bit more leeway in terms of how it was mapped out in terms of the dual player sort of clashing. I suppose that wasn't the case in terms of last year as well, because the hurling was packed into that same window, the minor hurling, as the sort of minor sort of football. So did you feel in terms of the panel and the resources that anyone doing dual last year, it was a particularly hard year for him?
It was, and it was tough on the dual player as well, because he was trying to manage both, and there was a bit of pressure to make both squads and then ultimately to make both teams. And when the windows are so short, obviously every manager wants to have his players, wants to have them full time, and fair play to the lads that did adapt to both, the 3 or 4 lads that did it. It was tasking, but they stuck to their guns, and it was great to see them get game time there in December last year, Jim.
And I suppose, Michael, if I can come on to you now in terms of the Clare under-20s and sort of such, you were sort of lucky enough last year that the whole pandemic sort of, it just sort of missed you in that sort of terms, that you got your sort of football played. And it was the first year for you sort of in charge of the Clare under-20s, and a sort of resounding victory the first day out against Waterford. Did you feel maybe that a tougher challenge against Waterford would have been a greater advantage for you heading into that Cork game?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose firstly the players were very focused on the Waterford game, because I think they probably had a point to prove from the year before, so that was very important for the players themselves. And so while under 20 is really all about development, as we said to the guys in the dressing room after, there's nothing better for development than winning a championship game, and they were really happy with that. I suppose it was the games we played in the O'Connor Cup in the 4 weeks prior to that, the league that's ran for the under 20s. We knocked great value out of that with games against Wicklow up in Auckram, and there's great bonding in those faraway trips. While when they're announced, first of all, you're looking at, my God, a day in Wicklow and the journey, but when you come home from a day and you play really well up there, and you cope with all the elements and the journey and the travel, there's huge bonding there. And we managed to get to the final of that competition, and we learned in the final. We didn't win the final, but we learned a lot. I say, if you're looking for learning experiences for under 20s, that was probably the great learning day of our time with them. And of course then we felt we were in a really good position to take on Cork, who were the reigning All-Ireland champions at the time. And I have to say, the players didn't stand back from that challenge. They were really, really focused. We knew that from the, very short turnaround from the Waterford game to the Cork game. It was a week. But on that Sunday morning session, when we sat down with the guys and did a little bit of video analysis, we knew what we were in store for on the Wednesday night coming. We knew that we were going to get a performance, and we almost pulled it off, but we have to look at that as another learning experience for these guys, and we've got to do better as we move forward.
And I suppose, Michael, you mentioned that Cork game, and it's important to note that there were 6 or 7 Cork starters from the previous year that won the All-Ireland that played against you that night above in Milltown. But as a manager now, Clare under 20 manager, I suppose, just from inside, I'm hearing there's 7 of this year's panel involved with Colm Collins's senior county setup. That's probably a first for, especially at that grade of under 20, to have maybe 6 or 7 players involved in a county panel as such. That must be a great sort of advantage in terms of this year looking ahead, to say that you've 6 or 7 players that are in training with the likes of Owen Cleary, David Turberty, night in, night out, and not only making up the numbers for the squad, but actually competing for starting places on the team coming into this league.
Oh yeah, look, that makes us all very proud. That we're very happy with that. In the dressing room after that Cork game, heads were down, but in fairness to our coaching team, David Gainey, Owen Murray, Martin Guerin, and Oscar O'Dwyer, our S&C men, we let them keep the heads down for about a minute, and then the boys threw out a challenge to them. They said, and the challenge was, lads, that tonight wasn't the test. The test is how many of you guys go on and play senior with Clare. And my God, when I was aware there was 7 there, and we're delighted with those numbers. It's in fairness, it's a testament to the players and the clubs themselves, as Dermot has said, and it's also a credit to the way the players are progressing from Dermot's squad. We find that they have already developed a lifestyle when they come into us, and that all we're doing is bridging the gap between minors and seniors. But yeah, I think for anybody in Clare, you'd have to be very happy that the 7 of them have progressed. Now 5 of them are underage this year, which is something we've mentioned to our panel last week, is that we're in the lucky position that we can't train yet, but yet 5 of our players are back in full contact training, which is it's a great step up for them.
I suppose, Seamus, in terms of Clare underage football in the last decade or so, there's a sort of a blossoming in terms of, we've seen since the Gavin Cooney sort of crew, the Dermot Coughlan sort of crew that burst on with Seamus Clancy to get to a Munster final, which was a first time in ages, that this is becoming a more regular occurrence. four Munster finals in the last 5 years, and Dermot Coughlan's crew in 2019 actually won the inaugural sort of the Munster round robin sort of phase one, that sort of final as well. So it's something, a regular occurrence. We're becoming very used to it in Clare, knocking on the door in terms of these underage development, and really Clare really closed the gap big time in terms of Cork and Kerry in the last 5 or 6 years of this grade.
Yeah, and it's an indication of the work that's been done at the various grades, I suppose at the development squads, but particularly at minor and under 20 or under 21 level. It's an indication of how hard the management teams are working with the players that they have, that these players are progressing to the next level. And I think, as Michael said there, you know, I suppose the minors start out, it's really the first serious test of our first serious opportunity players have of playing at intercounty level, and they're groomed there, and then they move on to the under 20 setup, which is again a stepping stone to the senior level, and that has been very noticeable in the last couple of years, as you say. You know, the amount that's coming through and they're staying at the game. You know, maybe in the olden days, if that's the right way of putting it, fellas might get a run at minor and they may not progress on to the next level, you know, or a small percentage, but you know, quite an amount of the players, the vast majority of the players that have come through with Dermot there in the last couple of years are really pressing hard to establish themselves with Michael in his under 20 selection. And as you've just mentioned the figures there, 7 of those on the senior panel. It shows you that the appetite is there. And now in the olden days, again, a lot of players might have been accused of not wanting to play at senior level for Clare football. That wasn't attractive enough. But the various management teams that's there now, the way they work, they have made it attractive. You know, and they're so professional in the way they're organised. All young players want to wear the Clare jersey, you know, whatever level. And I think that can only do good for the game. And it's a sign that, you know, we're challenging strongly. And while maybe the Kerrys and the Corks will be confident when they're playing Clare teams, I don't think any of them now are overly confident. And I don't think any of the teams coming through from Kerry and Cork will say, well, we're only playing Clare, we're going to get through, we're going to get over this. You know,
yeah, Seamus, can you hear me?
What Clare talking about.
Yeah, and Seamus, in terms of you mentioned the players start coming through. Once these players come out of intercounty minor and they make their first appearance for their club teams in adult championship, we've seen them really sort of stepping up and being real sort of leaders for their teams. Emmett McMahon being the sort of real challenge coming out of minor, going straight in and being the key man for Kildysart. Killian Rowan coming straight out of minor, going in and being the key man for Innistimon as sort of such. And they're obviously putting their hands up straight away for Colm Collins, and he's seen it and he's bringing them in straight away after their first club season. Seamus, did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm with you there. You went out of the air altogether for a minute.
Okay. Seamus, my question for you there is in terms of players sort of coming through after really sort of good sort of minor campaigns, then coming onto their club and playing their first level of adult championship, the likes of Emma McMahon for Kildysart, Killian Rowan for Innistimon. They're really coming in and being the leaders, taking the mantle for these sort of teams, and they're putting their hands up straight away for the likes of Colm Collins for inclusion into the senior team. This is not really players that are coming out of minor and taking 2 or 3 years to develop at adult level. They're coming straight out of intercounty minor, and in terms of some, most like Micheál Gary for Clare, being the key players for their club straight away, and in going, making it impossible for Colm not to include them in his plans.
Yeah, and I suppose we can't let the occasion go without paying tribute to the work that's been done in the schools as well, because you know all the secondary schools in Clare compete in the various competitions. Now we haven't had that in the past 12 months because of COVID, which is probably maybe a bit of a setback for the likes of Dermot, would be spotting players coming through the various school systems. But the people involved in the promotion of Gaelic football in the schools, you know, they have to get a lot of the credit as well for, you know, starting the players out, I suppose, in developing them to what they can have to come up against when they're playing teams in other counties. You know, so there's a whole series of people involved, you know, and when they come to to the likes of Dermot, Coughlan and Michael Neylon and their management teams. You know, these lads, they know what's ahead of them, and they obviously want to be part of that, and they want to get better at that, and they want to be part of the setups that'll have you playing against the top players from the Kerrys and the Corks and indeed the counties in Leinster and Connacht as well. You know, and that's what any young player wants in the modern world. You know, the demands are big, the amount of time that's involved is huge, but the players are prepared to put in that, and all for the sake of the saffron and blue of Clare, which is really what everybody wants to see.
And I suppose, Dermot, if I can come back to you now, you've seen both sides of the coin in terms of the Munster Minor Provincial Championship. In 2019, you saw the longer version where you got to play every county, the round 2 Robin phase, and then obviously round 1 Robin phase, and then on to round 2. Last year, you saw the cut sort of format with sort of straight knockout. You got to sort of Munster final as such. In terms of two sort of formats, having witnessed them both, which sort of format do you think is more beneficial for the enhancement of the younger player? Or do you feel that having the big day out in terms of the Munster final, if it can be achieved as well, is that more beneficial for developing players going forward?
Only one format, Jim, and that's the format from 2019. You need to be playing games. I would sacrifice the big day every day for getting games into this age group or this age group under 17 level. Basically, it's a development squad, and what you need to do is develop players at top level with inter-county games. I think we played 6 games in 2019, but the round robin system, which we actually look for again this year, but unfortunately with COVID, from what I understand, is going to go to knockout again, with Cork and Kerry probably being seeded in 2 groups of 3. But to answer your question, Jim, I mean, we got to play Limerick, Waterford and Tipperary. Then we played a final against the top 2, obviously played a final, and then you got a shot at Cork and Kerry again, which was 6 games. I think it's the way to go. You need to be playing games at any level, wherever you play it, whether it's under 10s right to seniors, but at inter-county level, it's vital that format. Clare gets back to that format again, because it does brilliant for the development of footballers.
Yeah, and I suppose, Dermot, people will look and say the way it is going now at senior inter-county level, the league, it takes real sort of advantage for Clare in terms of the sort of main sort of priority in the year. Would you sort of look and say that maybe in terms of the provincial championship at underage structure, that it's not really mimicking what players are going to see at adult level? Would it be more beneficial for the players to be playing those sort of counties in a sort of a league format like the senior team are playing, be in a Division 2 and be playing down Mayo, and then hopefully trying to get to a league final? Is that mimic what the adult team are doing, having them out before the senior team? Is that really a better format? Should it be provincial at under 18? Is there any need for it? Under 17?
I don't think so, Tim. I would love to see a Champions League format even at minor level. You know, let us split up into what you like. Even I know in 4H you might say it's a lot of games, but it's about progression. And I think the provincials are long dead. You know, I mean, if you told someone that in England you were going to draw Manchester United or Liverpool in the first 2 rounds of the Cup every year, it'd be hard to see that last in 100 years. You know, I think we need to pull away from the provincials, because, I mean, Munster is probably the strongest county. You look at a 20 level, even at the amount of what Cork and Kerry have won at 20 level, or Cork and Kerry have won at minor level, and Clare and Tipperary and Limerick are battling. I know you're going to maybe once in 25 years, once in 30 years, you have a chance of turning them over. But I mean, we need to go away from that. We need to play the Mayos, the Galways, the Downs in a different system, in a Champions League system where you're playing different styles of football, and your progression comes from playing different styles of football.
I suppose, Michael, in terms of the under sort of 20 setup this year, you're taking over a Clare team that got to an All-Ireland quarter-final at minor age sort of bracket, and probably the Clare that year were probably a top 6 team in the country in terms of their strength. And I suppose in the hindsight, when you look at that, probably Kerry were the top team in the country, and you could make a case that Cork were the 3rd or 4th best team in the country. So you have 3 teams from the one province, probably in the top 8 in the country in terms of, and maybe only one of them can come out of the province. That doesn't really seem a sort of an equal sort of status quo in terms of development, that you have Clare, that you probably are a top 6 team in the country, yet you're probably going to meet a top 1 or a top number 3 in the country in terms of development. While if you're in Leinster, you're going the chances that happening are slim to none.
Look, I suppose there's 2 scenarios here. There's what we'd love to be happening, and there's what's the reality on the ground. So, you know, we can talk a little bit about what we'd love to see happening, and it'll be very much along the lines of what Dermot is saying there, that, you know, it's all about games. And what we've seen, obviously under 20s has been knockout for the last number of years, and, you know, for as long back as I can remember, it's been knockout football. So what do you do then to make sure that you maximize the opportunity for your players? Is that you start early with them, you get challenge games, and then you move on to the, you know, the league situation, the O'Connor Cups, whereby you are really, really developing and you get yourself ready for that knockout. Sometimes the draw might be deemed favourable to you, so you can get a run. And sometimes you're going to be meeting the Corks or Kerrys in round 1, but you need to be ready for that. So that's what we'd love to see happening. We'd love to see the Champions League style format, you know, even if it was a group of 4 where you're guaranteed your 3 games and then you make your progression after that. We would love that. But then you look at what the chances are. I can see where, you know, when the under 20s is played, there's 3rd level college competitions which are quite prestigious, and, you know, they typically run in the January, February months of the year, followed by then the under 20s. And there's a tight window. I can see there's a tight window because these under 20s are very much in demand. Then they're top players. Their clubs want them. As you can see, some of them progressed quite quickly to the Intercounty senior team. So we're challenged by that time. So I suppose right now, Jim, what we're looking at is, you know, getting the maximum amount of time with the players before the knockout championship. And I think, look, at this year is going to be very different to last year. We've even, you know, we've chatted with the players and we've even talked about the experience, as we call it, of the under 20s from last year versus the experience that the under 20s this year have and are going to. It's very, very different, presents its own challenges. So I suppose it's our job to be really up for those challenges and condense excellent preparation into a shorter period of time, given that it's a very different year.
And I suppose, Michael, you mentioned that it's a very different sort of year, but the one thing that's been familiar in terms of the last few years, that the sort of psyche, the sort of mindset in terms of Cork has disappeared. It's disappeared at adult level, it's disappeared at underage level. But that sort of mental barrier and block in terms of performance, in terms of Kerry, still seems to be hanging around there. And I just know that Galway, for example, the Clare Miners in 2018, the All-Ireland quarter-final, they dominated Galway for long periods. But yes, they played Kerry in the Munster final, a Galway team probably the same level as Kerry, but weren't able to produce against Kerry. And that Galway team ran Kerry right close in the All-Ireland final that year. And last year, that Galway team, 10 of them that played against Clare in the 2018 All-Ireland quarter-final won the All-Ireland under-20s. 10 of them started. So in terms of that, why does Galway and counties like that, they don't have that psychological barrier underage when it comes to Kerry? Why Clare do, but Clare, when they play Galway, they don't have that in terms of performance? Is that mindset, is that the sort of $1 million question that as a coach has sort of baffled you?
Yeah, I'd be honest, Jim, I don't see it. We're in with a year, and I know we haven't played Kerry, but I wouldn't see anything coming the way of this group of players expressing themselves at the moment. And I think they've learned that, you know, at minor level, and, you know, it's year after year, it's coming through. I think they're preparing so well now. I think they're only just chomping at the bit to get their hands on, and it doesn't matter to this group of players, whether it's Cork or Kerry or Waterford or Tip or Limerick. I feel they're just professional about the way they go about their business, and it's really about us. And I think, you know, and I'm sure Dermot will be the same there, that we tend not to focus too much on the opposition, and, you know, that usually kind of serves us very well. That, you know, the management might keep an eye on the opposition and see, well, what do we need to do here, but the players really want to go out and play. And I suppose it's our job again to prepare them well enough and psychologically well enough to be able to deal with any challenge like that. But I think these players, the younger, you know, I suppose it's very enjoyable, Jim, and exciting for the likes of me to be involved with 19, 20-year-olds, because geez, they're fantastic people. You know, you're coming into training looking forward to it. You're going out of training, you're buzzing with the confidence. And I suppose, I think this particular, and you referred to it earlier, of this group of players over the last couple of years, I think they've quite a different mindset. I think they're just on a really positive track and a really progressive track. And you know, I don't think the opposition will be mentioned too much when it comes to championship knockout games.
And I suppose that, Seamus, in terms of underage, and I suppose the expectations, normally the past maybe 10 or 11 years, the issue of dual player was probably knocked on its head in terms of county board. In terms of the past, it was more of a privilege or royalty to be a Clare County minor hurler rather than a sort of footballer. And we've seen that come in equation again below in Tipperary, for example, where pressures are being put on to choose one code over the other, and sort of Limerick in terms of that, it's very much gone that way as well. But in terms of Clare's progression, in terms of on the adult scene playing Division 1, 2 sort of football, youngsters are very sort of open-minded these days of trying to, they see a real sort of possibility for the future of Clare football. So the dual issue, Clare seems to be, and Cork seems to be the only two counties really advocating such an approach these times in terms of that dual player issue compared to the rest of the counties. Obviously Kerry, the hurling sort of ain't really an issue there, but in terms of Waterford, Tip and Limerick, the sort of focus has been very much switched on development of one code, maybe perhaps a tiny bit over the other one, and underage. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's the way it would seem at the moment. Personally, I think that it's disappointing that the GA as an organisation don't kind of encourage dual participation, at least up to and including minor level. Because by then, I think players would be in a position themselves to know which code they're doing better at, and to know the demands and how big the demands are, and that they may then be in a better position to choose for one grade above the other. You know, tis a pity that they would have to do it anyhow, you know, in the first place. But you know, the demands are so great now, and the amount of games. And you have the two lads there, Dermot and Michael, talking about, you know, that they would love to see a champion-style system in those particular grades. That would even put greater demands on players, because they're taking more time involved. So, you know, it's a difficult one from that point of view. But it is sad, I think, you know, that it's certainly up to and including minor, that players should be encouraged and given every chance to play both codes. And, you know, by then, they'd be in a far better position than to choose one above the other, if, you know, as you progress up along the line. But with the way the game has gone and the amount of games that are there now at the various levels, it's very, very hard for any player to have the time to fulfill or to obey two masters, if you like, because, you know, most of these lads are in college, and when the COVID situation is sorted out, and hopefully we're all hoping that will be sooner rather than later, you know, you'll be back to third level competitions, and you'll be back to a full club program, you know, and in small counties, size wise and club wise, clubs need their players, and there are more and more we see in Clare for the last number of years. There are more and more dual players now. There mightn't be that many dual clubs, but practically every club has a player or two that's very prominent in the other court of what's dominating his own club. You know, so from that point, you know, you've seen an Intercounty player. Milltown is a noted football club, and you're one of the regular Clare senior Intercounty hurlers coming from that club. You know, that's just an indication of the way the thing is gone. And you maybe the same with Kilmurray now with Aidan McCarthy. You know, one of the brightest young hurling prospects in the country. So the talent is there, and there are players that could play both codes with our county if the opportunity arose. But I think the day of the regular dual players we saw back in the 70s with the Corks and these counties, I think that's gone, unfortunately. But I think that it should be encouraged as much as possible up to and including minor level, so that players will have a better chance then to assess which code they would opt for themselves.
And I suppose, Seamus, we're talking about player pathway and we're talking about player sort of development. And I've been sort of cases in the past where players, we know Conor McManus never played minor for Monaghan. We know there's been several sort of cases in terms of players not actually featuring in sort of underage squads or developing later. I suppose if you look maybe at the club scene in Clare, I suppose you'll take someone like James Murphy from Clondegad, who's a bit dominant midfielder in terms of thing. He really didn't really develop till he was probably 22 or 23 till he started to shut up. So that minor and under 20 sort of passed him by in terms of that. So how important is it that why we do encourage the underage sort of prospects coming through from that under 17, under 20, that club players that are developed by their clubs that might come through at 24, 25, that they see an opportunity to throw on the Clare jersey, that if you haven't met it at under 17 or under 20, I'm just throwing out James Murphy for an example, because of his sort of development where he shut up, that door is open for you, or that players really do see a possibility that if you're not an under 17 or an under 20 footballer, that you could still force your way into Colm Collins's plans? Or do you think that door is slimming or that door is closing on those types of players?
I wouldn't say so. I think any management that has ambitions of leading their team to glory will have an open mind. And there are players who won't develop that early. Like of the Clare All-Ireland winning team from the 90s, that great team. As far as I can remember, either Shawnee McMahon or Brian Lohan made the county minor team of that time. And I remember seeing a Hartley Cup final that year, and Brian Lohan didn't make it with St. Pat's and Shannon. He wasn't even starting in that team, and look at what the men delivered after. And even Martin Daly was on the St. Flannan's Hartley Cup team ahead of Ollie Baker. They were in school together, and he had Flannan's win a Hartley Cup, and Ollie was only a sub on that team. So players mightn't develop that early, and all of a sudden, within a year, when they're 19 or that way, they could become first choice player in the county senior team. So I think the managements are there, and I'd say Michael and Dermot will tell you that they're always keeping an eye on players coming through, and they won't they'll never shirk the challenge of picking up somebody that mightn't have been there at the start of their term in charge. If they spot somebody is making it and is improving consistently, as will happen, because there are individuals out there who will work their socks off day and night just to improve their own game. And while they're at 16 years of age or 17 years of age, they may not be making it onto the county panel of that age group. Within a year, they could be first choice player in the next age group. So I think the managements do keep that in mind all the time, and certainly any of the management that I've seen in Clare, because they want to progress. They're open players, who may not have been there when they started.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, in terms of looking for the year ahead, in terms of player sort of, you mentioned there about the challenges lay ahead, and I suppose last year you got to speak to a number of intercounty sort of managers, build up sort of relations. Being that sort of planning that goes on behind the sort of scenes in terms of preparation, not having any dates, in terms of keeping those sort of contacts in terms of that sort of discussion going forward, is that sort of hard? Are you always trying to keep those sort of relationships with the managers from different sort of provinces to say, let's keep those sort of contacts, keep in close contact, because at the drop of the hat you might get a green light to go, and then you need to be able to arrange those challenges at the drop of the hat, and probably in neutral venues, and and how important is it to keep that dialogue or that communication going even throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, it is important, I suppose, going back to, a lot of these communications that you talk about, Jim, started back in December, because I suppose everybody, we thought that maybe January was going to be a kick-off month, and then we thought maybe February might be the time when we'd get to play, and so on and so forth, and we're now here at the end of April. But yeah, those contacts are very important, and I suppose we're lucky enough, Galway and Mayo are very near us, and so there'll be good relationships there, and ready for action if if and when we're allowed. You know, last year we had some good challenges with Offaly, with Laois, and you know, they'd be quite progressive teams. And yeah, you know, it's a two-way process. They're all looking for challenge games as well once this gets up and running. And I suppose the concern we'd have, Jim, is that we might not get as much time as we'd like for that. You know, we're looking for certainty, but we may be looking at a window of 3 or 4 weeks for preparation of an under-20s team this year. We may be, and to be fair to all our players, we've about 50 players who are working remotely at the moment, and we have to be fair to them and give them a fair chance, you know, over the course of some trials as well, to put their best foot forward. So it's I suppose the challenge is for us to be more brilliant than we've ever been before, and to be better at our job in a shorter time. It's possible, it's doable, we know it's doable, and I suppose all we're looking for now is the green light, as you mentioned, to put all that into action very quickly.
And I suppose, Dermot, if I can come to you in terms of, you mentioned that sort of preparation time, and given that it's sort of new panel for you, would it be more beneficial for if the under-15 club season and under-17 club season happen before minor this year, so you can actually go and visit those club games and get to see those players in action in terms of that, rather than being condensed into a sort of closed season where you have to make a decision on a player within a space of a month?
Yeah, definitely, Jim. I'm definitely with you on that one. I was hoping they'd run the club season first, because a lot of these lads seen very little football last year. It's very unfair on them. They have a lot of work done. We're aware of the work they're doing now since January. Fantastic guys that are coming across here as well. To try and rush all of that into 2 or 3 weeks of trials and probably play championship within 4 or 6 weeks, it's just very unfair on the players. I would love to see let these guys play their club matches, play their club football, have a look at them, then bring them in for trials after they've played a few games. It's a fair assessment on everyone. It's a fair assessment on the players, and I think it's going to be the best way forward, Jim.
I suppose, Dermot, some of these clubs, as you mentioned, those managers, they haven't seen their players on the training field for over a year or sort of such. They're eager sort of to develop their players in sort of the club season, to try and pull them between both club and county at the moment when the club hasn't seen them for over a year or so. Would it be, as you mentioned, just beneficial, run the club off, let the club players have them, and then let them go into intercounty?
That would be the ideal scenario, Jim. They would have no problem with that whatsoever. But look at, I mean, who knows? I mean, what they're talking about the minute Munster Council is that they're going to run off last year's competitions. Obviously, the minors wouldn't finish last year. There's an All-Ireland semi-final to be played between Kerry and Roscommon. The Leinster final isn't played. The Ulster final isn't played. So that's going to take up a couple of weeks. Then you're into the leave insert where the guys are basically preparing for their future. So a lot of it is up there at the minute, Jim, you know, of what's happening. But I would rather see a later on in the year competition give those players a fair chance.
And I suppose, Dermot, last year you had that sort of preparation sort of tournament in terms of the under 16 sort of, it was I think it was the Manning sort of cup that was held in October, where you could actually trial players in inter-county games as sort of such for that sort of preparation. I know it didn't come to pass in terms of the COVID or such, but you got to see a good number of players throughout that game. That probably competition is probably not available to you as well this year. So how much of a hindrance is that as well, that you were able to see players in inter-county challenges last year before the actual making of the squad even?
Actually, our last meeting with him, Jim, I don't think they're going to allow any challenge matches at all.
Okay.
So you're on about running trials in maybe a 4 to 6 week window with in-house games. It's going to be very challenging, Jim. And we're just hoping as this goes on that the format will probably change a little bit and we'll get a little bit more time with these guys. So we are at 80 players at the minute. As I've stressed there at the start, it's vital that you look at every player because of the age group that you're dealing with and give everyone a shot. But you're also mindful of the preparation. Normally we give ourselves 6 months. We normally start on the 1st of October for April for April football, which you really need, and you'd have to be playing at least 8 or 9 top quality challenge in that window. But I think everything is condensed now into probably 4 or 6 weeks, and it's going to be challenging, Jim. Yeah.
And I suppose, Dermot, last year you were able to, from the 2019, you were able to carry maybe 8 or 9 over from that sort of team, and that was right up through your spine, and they were all sort of starters. This year, I imagine that number is probably a bit shorter. You probably only have 2 or 3. So in terms of forming a team, probably last year you had a spine of a team, dare I say, even before you started out the year.
We had a great core last year. I think we had 7 coming into last year, Jim, which was a great core. It's what you need. And they were all players that were actually playing up along the centre, so they'd actually played county football before. And when you put these lads into a team and they're forming the core of your team, the spine of your team, it's very easy to build around those players in, because they're dominating their position and they're bringing more lads into the game. This year we have 3 players, as you said. You know, we have young Quinningham, Odin Quinningham, Dylan O'Brien, Craig Reardon. You know, and you'll be hoping to fit those lads into the spine of the team and build around them. But it's going to be tasking, it's going to be challenging. But I suppose that's where we're at the minute with the COVID, and hopefully, Jim, we can get a bit of game time and a bit of time to prepare these players right.
And I suppose with that as well, our targets, and I suppose there was great optimism last year in terms of prospects and sort of. So is it more a level-headed sort of approach in terms of expectations, try and quell the expectations this year, given that you only have 2 or 3 through the core, that it's probably different in terms of your starting base last year than what you had?
Our targets will still be the same, Jim. You know, I mean, we are still, no matter what preparation time we're going to get, it's going to be condensed. But look, you got to remember, the other counties have probably been in a similar situation. Maybe Kerry, once more, they'll have 2 squads on the go. They'll have last year's squad, mix them with this year's squad. So it's going to be able to bring that quality in when you're playing your in-house games. But our targets remain the same, Jim. We're looking to win every game we play. And you know, what I see, if attitude is anything to go by, what I see these lads with their Zoom sessions and their conditioning and the work that they're coming back with, I think they're going to give a good account of themselves, Jim.
And I suppose, Michael, in terms of working with a panel, and we saw Dermot, it's very much a new sort of panel he's working with this year. I suppose in terms of your sort of panel, dare I say that you had maybe 5 or 6 on the age last year, but you had probably a whole load, probably 19 or 20 of that panel that are underage again this year, sort of such. So in terms of that, it's not very much working from right from scratch again. You really have a really strong foundation to work on, because you've worked with all those players, 20 of those players even last year.
Yeah, look, we would have, there's probably 9 or 10 of those players who started in the championship games last year are underage now. I'm not sure how it worked out like that. There's obviously, you know, at under 20s level, what you find is that there are some guys that step out of Dermot's panel and they're ready. So you're looking at 3 years whereby, and it's the very same this time around, because, you know, we would have picked up quite a lot of quality players from the panel that has just graduated from Dermot, that team that was playing there at Christmas that we were glued to the tellies on. So it's, in Clare anyway, we find that it's at under 20s, the 3 years of it, the age doesn't really matter. It's the quality. So that a guy stepping out of under 17s has the ability to make it onto the team, and I suppose we're blessed in that way. So, you know, yeah, you're right that we think, and given the short time that we have, we hope it'll be an advantage to us that we had 10, 15 of these guys involved last year. So a lot of the concepts we'll be talking about, and a lot of the experience, and maybe some of the hurt that we had there against Cork, that means something now as we go into this year. So yeah, it's probably quite different to Dermot's situation, and we hope that it's going to put us in a good position to just like Dermot said there, you know, to win whatever games we get, that we can go out and we can take them.
And I suppose Seamus, lastly, to start to finish off with yourself, in terms of, we mentioned about players and we mentioned about pathways and we mentioned about the leaders in the sort of the senior squad. We saw Gary Brennan, after a wonderful intercounty career, and Gordon Kelly as well, step away. I suppose we are going through that sort of period now where we have a whole cluster of young lads coming through from, say, 17 to 22, and then we probably have a bit of a gap then really to our own Clearys and that, and Keelans, who are probably the 27, 28s, and they may up to the Kevin Hartnetts and Cathal O'Connors. In terms of those players' developments, how important is it? I know Cathal and David and Kevin have had wonderful inter-county careers, but how important is it Clare keep those sort of lads, for David and Kevin and Cathal, in that sort of environment for the next 2 or 3 years to help transition sort of these players? Because it's very important that after Gary and Gordon going, that we don't see David and Kevin and Cathal and Sean Collins and a few more step aside within a short period of time either.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I think the importance of what you say will be highlighted this year with the absence of Gary Brennan and Gordon Kelly from the senior intercounty setup. You know, they've been such magnificent leaders over the past 10 years, and have to replace them now straight away is going to be very difficult, but that's a job for the senior management. But their absence will be a loss in terms of the encouragement and the leadership that they provided to the younger players coming through. You know, it was always noticeable anytime you'd see a senior training session, the way that both those two fellas in particular, you know, would be having a word with the younger players coming in, encouraging them, offering them words of advice, you know, and they were invaluable. They were important for more than just their playing ability, you know, from that point of view. So I think it's important that Kevin Hartnett and Cathal O'Connor and fellas like that you mentioned, that they continue to do that, fill that role, if you like, because young fellas coming through, they have ability, and there's no doubt about that. There are lots of young footballers in Clare with great ability, but you need the assistance and the guidance of the experienced players, you know, to help you along the way, and to help you particularly at 19 or 20, you know, when there are little tricks that fellas learn, you know, from their experience playing the county games that will stand to them, and they'll be able to advise the younger players coming through. And I'm sure Gordon Kelly and Gary Brennan will do that whenever any chance they get, but their absence will be sorely felt, you know, from the playing field and from that role.
And I suppose, Seamus, one quick last sort of question, I suppose, it's not, we sort of forgot to mention the schools. And I suppose we have one school in Clare, Flannans, that are competing in the Kearney Very, knocking on the door, also in the Fruin as well. In terms of, they got to the under 16.5 Fruin final last year, beating Brendan's along the way, losing to Pobble Skull Nagale in sort of the final. In terms of Clare's sort of development and their players going forward, we have one school competing at the top end of Munster football, mixing it with the Kerrys and the Corks and that. How important is it maybe to form another base, to get another school up to playing those type of teams on a regular basis at under 15.5 and under 18 to play the top notch? Or do you think that's a pipeline sort of dream that we'll only be working with Flannans competing for honours year in, year out at the real top? I know there's other wonderful schools like Spanish Point and Clare and other sort of secondary sort of schools like Kilmehel, but in terms of the real sort of A bracket, would that be where we have Corks and Kerrys, who have maybe 4 or 5 schools competing at that age group? How important is it really that for Clare and our schools that we get another school up there alongside Flannans competing?
There's no doubt it will be a huge help. There's no doubt. But, you know, in fairness to that, I think there's wonderful work being done in all the schools in Clare. Spanish Point in its time, and in particular, you know, they have been stood out in Mary Mackler School in Lisdoonvarna. You know, they've stood out. But I suppose from the other side, the other point of view is Flannans College have a student base, I suppose, of about 1,200. You know, which is much greater than the other schools in Clare. So it's probably easier for them to have more players available, number one. So from that point of view, and I know it was mooted in the recent past about an amalgamation of the other schools, But obviously the pandemic put pay to that because of the difficulties in traveling and bringing people together, and with the lockdown and all that, you know, and things have changed. The pandemic has changed everything. It has changed how lives, and it has changed how schools operate with across the board, and it has changed how they're going to operate with their sporting situations and bringing lads together. So it will be a while, I think, before things ever get back to near where they were, and that's going to be a challenge in itself for people, whether they're management in schools and whether they're involved in sport or whatever. So it's going to take a while to get that situation sorted out, let's say, and get back. So for the time being, let's say, you know, we're looking at what has been the case, and the Innistein and CBS's and the Spanish Points and the St. Mary's or Mary Immaculate and Listonvan, and those schools will continue to compete every chance they get, and they'll continue to compete with the Bs and the B and C competitions, where they are doing quite well and are putting Clare on the map as well. And if all those schools are contributing players to the county panels, so you know the work has been done, and there are teachers in those schools who give freely of their time in preparing the players as well. So, you know, yes, it would be great to have 4 or 5 teams from Clare schools in Cornwall Murray, but it's just the way things are, and numbers dictate, and certainly the current pandemic has dictated.
On that note, we'll wrap it up for this evening. My name is Jim Conlan. Thanks for listening for the RCB Radio Sports Show live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM. This show will be broadcast on our YouTube channel Friday night at 9 p.m. and it'll also go out live on air next Monday night from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on RCB Radio Sport West Clare live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM. But for me, Jim Conlan, good night, God bless, and stay safe. Take care.